Okay, welcome. We did it. We did it, everyone. Hi, I am going to invite you in the chat, if you've not yet already, shared who you are and where you are, and what you're hoping or excited about to hear in this breakout. I am personally so moved and excited to hear from Amy and Cynthia and Matt and Robert. And this is just, anyway, this is going to be a delicious time together. I'm going to invite you always to use chat as a way to share your learnings, what resonates with you, an oof moment or an ah moment or a moment. And we're going to have Amy, Matt, and Cynthia go first as a team, and then we'll hear from Robert, and then we'll be able to be in discussion. Okay, cool. Amy, Cynthia, and Matt, how are you feeling? You ready to rock? Okay, beautiful. Let's go first. I'm going to turn it to you, Amy.
Matt.
I'm going to go turn it to you first, Matt.
You like how quiet I said that? Yo.
Yes, Matt. And Matt and Robert, Cynthia and Amy, the first time you talk, why don't you share just one line about who you are?
One line. My name's Matt Reddam. I am a licensed therapist, and I currently work for Butte County Office of Education in Chico, California, Butte County, California. I'm the school and community wellness advisor, and I'm still figuring out what that means after 6 years. So happy to be here. So let's just start very quickly with what this is and how this came about. I didn't know Cynthia or Amy at all. And I was in the fellowship. I think we all were. And we were also navigating our own work, which was very overwhelming and unpredictable. And so it came time for sort of the coalescing everything we learned and the capstones. And I'll be honest, I did not want to do it. I did not know what I would do. And I found that was maybe common with Cynthia and Amy as well. So Leora and her brilliance connected us together, and we decided that we wanted to look at uncovering what happens when you are in a position where you're leading crisis work, you're deeply involved in crisis work, and you're a human being. And you may have experienced that same tragedy that you're responding to, that crisis, that fire, racism, subjugation, all of the things. And it's complex. How do you tease out meaning? How do you learn from your own experience and the experiences of others? And so we did a series of interviews, and we really want to look at providing a comprehensive support framework that at the very least speaks to the reality of this, because I think that that's a big part of this. And we don't talk about it. We give it a little bit of lip service, but many of us are in it every single day and are challenged with this every single day. So it's been awesome, and I consider both Amy and Cynthia friends and have been wonderful. So let's get to some of the questions and the central questions that we asked through this. So we really wanted to look at these are not necessarily questions we asked folks. We had a series of questions which we'll share as well. But we wanted to really be guided by these central ideas: is how do we navigate crisis in our professional world when it's impacting our personal world, right? Simple, not simple, because it takes the assumption that we know we know these things. And I think often in crisis response, we don't know. We know when we suddenly start getting sick. We know when we get burned out, but we don't know. So even that first question, I think, has the assumption that we're aware this is happening. And then next, how do you keep going, right? We talk about this state of survival versus a state of thriving. And again, I would say an important distinction that I know for myself: when I'm in it, I don't know the difference because I don't know I'm in survival. So we really wanted to also center what are the gifts that people receive from this work? What are they learning still? How does it impact their identity? And how do those things interact so that we can keep going? And we were fortunate to get a lot of those answers. So next slide. All right, now this is, I think, you, Amy.
Why not? Hello, I'm Amy Castellanos. I am currently the founder of Moving the Soul. And I have been working for the last 15 years at the intersection of behavioral health, public health, and school districts, and how that all kind of coalesces together. I've been so fortunate to work with Matt and Cynthia during this process because I had a huge question for the last 5 years about how do I keep going? I've kind of niched myself into suicide response and postvention work throughout the years and done a lot of diving into that. And I also personally experienced suicide in my own family. And it's not just one, it's something that is continuing to take out generations of my family. So the question has become like, how do we keep going when this hard thing keeps happening? And what does that do to us? So to start talking to people, initially, we all started talking to people who had very similar experiences as us. And so the initial 10 interviews that we did, many of them were interviews with people that we knew personally that had gone through big things that were similar to what we were going through. And so that was the initial selection. My gift was to interview Cynthia and Matt as well and hear how some of those are just very similar experiences when we're talking about like the overall themes of the experiences that we're going through. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute, but I'd love to hear from Cynthia. How did you select the few people that you interviewed? Because I know my selection was much more like I know somebody who has navigated suicide prevention, postvention work, and also experienced it in their personal life. So what was your process?
Well, I came onto the project with Matt and Amy a little bit uh after they had started. And so what I learned from them is that their trauma was just so different from what I personally was experiencing. My name is Cynthia Vega. I am a lifelong LAUSD staff member. I've been an educator for 23 years now, finishing up 24. And I work in the same community that I was born in. I was literally born 2 blocks from where I work. And so the two people that I asked work in the same community. One in particular grew up in that community, was a former student, not of mine, but she was a student at the school that I worked at when I was an administrator. And so what I wanted was to identify two people who captured or who were representative of the community and had experience in the community, so that you all who have joined us here today and also Matt and Amy were able to um, kind of get a sense for what it's like to be in the heart of Los Angeles.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. And Matt, how did you select the couple people that you selected?
I think it was pretty immediate. The two individuals that I chose, and I mean, I have a laundry list that I could have interviewed, but I was working with these two individuals the day after the fire that we experienced, and so we have sort of traded stories, and we have shared for professional reasons and personal reasons. So it was a really simple choice for me. One sort of works in, the community partner world, and the other works in the education world. And I think selfishly, I wanted to know how they were doing this. Right? Like, it's a very narcissistic venture for me. I'm like, let me figure myself out and do it through these questions and these two individuals. And so I think there are some other folks that I would like to interview before we put something together that can give a different representative viewpoint and perspective on impact, because to be Black in this community, to be Hmong in this community, to be Latinx in this community is a very different world. And that undoubtedly stretches to crisis response and leadership. So I'm really appreciative of the time I got to spend with these folks and the time I got to spend with Amy as well, and with Cynthia. So
Yeah, and that's was a lot of it. We only got to interview 10 people. So there's so much more work to be done there are very many voices that haven't been heard in this project yet. And we are looking at more urban, areas. So we'd love to get some more remote voices heard, some indigenous voices, just voices that give us a larger perspective. But for this work, we were able to do these 10 voices, and hear from them in various forms, or hear from them in various forms of dual crisis. The one thing I will say that I found really interesting in my experience when I was recruiting people, I initially had recruited thinking that we were going to be able to have people who were willing to have their stories heard, and that we wouldn't need any anonymity in that process. And unfortunately, what I found that is if people were working for the school districts, they were only comfortable speaking if we promised anonymity. And many of those were because they needed to speak, their experience had to do with their leadership or had to do with their systemic issues that happen within the school district as well. So I just wanted to kind of point that out. There are many voices here that haven't been heard, and this project is just now getting started. The next slide. So thinking about how we chose the interview questions was a really interesting way, because there were a list. We started to write down questions initially, and there was a list. I think we got up to about 30 before we said, okay, let's back this down a little bit. So we looked at the renewal section of the school mental health crisis leadership lessons. And you'll see in that guide, you'll see some reflection questions that were adapted. We also use the recast questions as well. And the recast grant, Leora, I didn't think about sharing that, but we also used that as well. So we'll have to put that on the website later on. Oh, or Leora can just tag it here. So these are a few of the questions. They did break down into 3 sections. What was the personal and professional experience? We really wanted to explore how identity and intersectionality of professional crisis, how that all impacted, and then discuss the grief and trauma, because that mourning piece is a part of the renewal and a part of how we're held in that, or how we're held in that process as a part of our renewal as well. So just a few of the quotes that came from the interviews. Cynthia?
Thank you. It was like I'm living with it, and then I'm also trying to help others mitigate it. I have to dig even deeper to find resources that I wasn't sure at the moment that I even had, but I had to trust that I did have them because it was my son, right? And that really carried through all the way through into leadership and how I would advocate for parents and community and having that lived experience at the table. And this is from one of our interviewees, the director of school-based services, and her son attempted suicide. She shared her personal anecdotes about advocating for children, her own child, and the children that she works with. Second quote from our interviewee, Chicana, a young lady I mentioned earlier, is a DACA student, a DACA adult, who shared her stories of navigating her status while advocating for students who are in the same situation. We did a lot of anti-bias work trainings throughout the pandemic. The people at the forefront are already experiencing the trauma, the racism, and the hate. You are trying to teach the people who are responsible for your experience to treat you with dignity, to treat you like a human while you are enduring the difficulty of navigating the world as yourself, a brown woman who is undocumented, and then still trying to convince you, I am a human and you are mad at me because I am addressing it. I am trying to convince you of my humanity. And a lot of my colleagues were hostile. And yes, racism is traumatic. And again, during the pandemic, this was not 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. This was just a few years ago.
Matt, do you want to talk to us about some of the unexpected gifts that we found?
Yeah, I was just taking that in for a second.
Yeah.
That last quote, sorry. Yeah, I mean, this is the hardest part of recovering from any crisis is and recovering from traumatic stress and recovering from grief is how do you make meaning out of something you want to get away from you? You don't want next to you. You don't want in your body and soul and being. And yet every single individual we spoke with, including each other, had gifts, you know, and even that word gifts, it's hard. It doesn't come out of my mouth well because that's hard to reconcile, and that is part of the work. Some of the things that were noted were like the power of pause, like how necessary it is to stop and how hard that is and how intentional that has to be. Navigating self-expression and shifting of identity was enormous. It was a lot of this. And it is, again, how do you know your identity shifts? There's no line of demarcation where you're like, boom, there it is. Ah, I'm different. You just lose a sense of where you are. And in that grounding, you become something different, right? In that finding. Relational systems of support came up over and over again, and that was really strongly related to titrating connection. The idea that, you know, for some of us in crisis, we go inward, you know, introverts, people who have intimacy barrier stuff, people who have early complex trauma, often connection is not the first place they go when they're not okay. And in fact, that can feel threatening. So how do we titrate that? How do you begin by sending a text? How do you then maybe scheduling a call with somebody? So we found that that was a huge piece as well. How do we honor the humanity in all the ways it shows up and utilize the folks around us and our colleagues? And again, that sounds very trite and simple, but we're dealing with human beings who are super complex and have differing histories and identities. And so the importance of colleagues, yes, they are important, but are they safe? And how do we get to a place where they feel safe? Just based on that last quote, right? Activation and repair and reflective moments. Like these were all pieces of what we all learned and continue. I shouldn't say learned, what we're all continually trying to learn. So it was wonderful. Who's this? Is this me too?
You want to just start by kind of summing up? That'd
Yeah.
be great.
So just the first question here, how has sharing our personal and professional story of the past influenced our approach to leadership or our healing work? What would you say, Amy, to that one?
Honestly, for me, what I've found so influential is having my experience validated, that it is difficult to lead in these moments when I have a recent suicide death and I have to go and run a training or a postvention for a school. Having the piece of my identity shifting, the need to withdraw and be in a cocoon for a moment, that validation of the experience, and I'm not just allowing my trauma to take over, right? Because oftentimes I've been in situations where my leadership will tell me specifically, like, maybe you just can't handle this type of work. This work's just not for you. And so to have it validated that yes, there are moments that we need to take a step back, and that I'm not always the person be the right person to hold space for my staff, that I can say all of the right things and do all of the steps, but I can be the activation for my staff because I am in a position of authority, and that it's okay to train my staff to hold space for each other.
How about you, Cynthia? That same question.
Well, I'm gonna say an odd bird a little bit in that um I I started this work having had a significant amount of early childhood trauma. I do have a score of 10, 10 out of 10 by the age of 10 on the ACE test. And so it's always been something that I hold on the side. You know, it informs my practice, but I have never felt comfortable and I certainly have never been encouraged to share that with my colleagues. And so having to set aside who I am as a human being, as I'm trying to recover, you know, for over 20 years has not been easy. But during this particular time and during this project, I think something that has been very meaningful for me is my worlds, my boxes kind of coming together in a safe space, this, you know, this idea of recovery and renewal. And so working as a leader, I was a principal during the pandemic and also had a significant loss, not just to COVID, but, you know, a teacher and student who passed, who died by suicide during that time. And so leading other adults as they're navigating their own survival, while I myself am sort of like clinging um for my own, you know, like for my own sort of well-being was very difficult. But for me, again, hearing these stories, like Amy said, was not only validating, but empowering in many ways because I don't feel alone and I don't feel silenced. And again, not to say that anyone specific or, you know, my organization silenced me, but it isn't something that's typical.
Mm.
And the only space that was able, at least for myself, I can speak for myself, that I was able to sort of voice some of those difficulties that I was struggling with was with the SCRR fellows in the work before the fellowship. Just being able to be honest that I'm not currently okay, and I have to get up, suit up, and show up for others. And I'll add another, just a quick note. I think I wanted to say this earlier, but during this time, during the pandemic, I did sort of decide that I wanted to do things for myself a little bit more, and I did two pretty significant things. One of them was I started a doctoral program, but the second thing is, as a, you know, woman in my late 40s, I just had a baby. I'm 3 weeks postpartum, and I want to thank Matt and Amy for allowing me to be to join them in this work, and also just again doing something for myself that I've kind of put on hold for a couple decades. And so being able to live as I want has been a gift of this not just this project, but sort of the coming to terms with being a survivor and helping others to work through their truths.
Beautiful, beautiful, Cynthia. I'm going to invite Amy to do one closing sentence about where this work is going, these interviews, what folks might see, expect, and then Robert, I'm prepping you to take big breaths and getting ready to share your piece. Amy, close it out.
So this work, we are going to be doing a few more interviews and putting together some what do we want to say, some publications from this work. So we can't tell you exactly what's coming, but we can tell you there's more coming in the summer and then again, hopefully within the fall, just to kind of be a culmination of everything and what were those gifts that people had or that had emerged for people, and how can we put those out there so other experiences are validated as well. So we look forward to bringing you more. And Robert, I look forward to hearing your story.
As Robert's hydrating, I want to take a moment to invite folks in chat to share a celebration, to share an awe moment. And I will do for these three, I'm going to do it verbally, which is that these three folks have never met before in real life. One is in Southern California, one's in Northern California, one's in Arizona, completely different stories of dual crisis lived experience, and they have found each other in such a gorgeous way. And truly held space for each other so that they can, and given each other permission to be held. which is a wild, courageous task. And I personally believe that it's this work, when I hold the things that I am in charge of holding, is a conversation that no one is having, except for right now. So thank you, thank you. Okay, again, inviting you in chat to celebrate. We're gonna move into hearing from Robert, and then we'll have time to unmute and discuss. Robert, how would you like me to give you a cue when you're done? You want me to give you a 2-minute warning or 5?
Yeah, two is good.
Okay, good. I'm gonna good. All right, let's go, Robert. Here's my intro sentence to Robert before he says himself. Robert is going to share his own journey, and that he started with this idea, and then the Capstone project became another idea, and it's actually what it became that is the work itself. So this is kind of a meta. All right, Robert, go
All
for it.
right. Well, thank you, Leora. That was thank you, and Matt, Amy, and Cynthia. That was a great presentation. So my name is Robert Franklin, and I am the education coordinator for Lucas County Children's Services. Lucas County Children's Services is a child protection agency in Northwest Ohio. And my role as the education coordinator is that I make sure that students who are in foster care have the resources and supports so that they can be academically successful. A lot of our children who are in care have experienced trauma, whether it's from abuse, neglect, even coming into the foster care system can be traumatic, because we remove children from their parents, a lot of times they're split up from their siblings and put into different places where that they do not know the person that they're being placed with. So my role, because a lot of times these students have trauma, and they have some kind of trauma response, such as fight, flight, freeze, and they end up getting in trouble at school. And so we have to go in and talk to the teachers and administrators to try to talk to them and say, hey, look here, this student did not intend to behave the way that they did. They were just responding to a trauma. And the schools will oftentimes say that, yes, we understand, we're trauma informed. However, they focus more on the behavior. They negate looking at the pain or the trauma that the student is going through. And so my original plan was, and Leora, can you next slide, please? My original plan was to create a workshop that for teachers, educators, who to help them understand, look, children in foster care, they come with a lot of baggage. They have a lot of trauma, and a lot of times there's different things that will just trigger a response. And as I was planning on doing that, one of the mentors for me told me, well, Robert, that's good, but why don't you tell your story? Why don't you put yourself, your experience, your story into what the students have experienced? Kind of like, that I would put on the shoes that they're walking in. And I was kind of like, oh, I don't know about that one. I didn't really want to look at my story. I was kind of thinking, well, what does my story have to do with anything? What I experienced it. I got through it. I moved on. And another mentor reminded me of a word called Sankofa. And Sankofa is an African term that means it is okay to go back and get that which was lost or forgotten in order to bring it forward to this present day so that we can move forward to build the future. And at that point, I was kind of like, this is okay, this might be something, telling my story, but how would I do it? How would I go and tell my story? Where would I start? What would I say? And as I was processing that with my mentor again, she said, why don't you not just write, why don't you write your story, but not just a story? Why don't you, what would your today self, what would the person that you are today say back to your younger self? And I was like, whoa, I kind of like that. Yeah, okay. And so I started to think, and I said, okay, well, I would have to slow things down. I got to slow this down in telling my story, because how do I do this? How do I have this conversation? And so I said, well, I got to have a dialogue between today's Robert and my younger Robert. And so I began to process that. And like I said, I slowed down telling my story. And I looked at different events that happened. And I had a dialogue between myself today and my younger self. And we kind of processed that. And I want to read a little excerpt from what I wrote. This part right here is from when Robert was the younger Robert and today's Robert had been talking already. They've been talking about a lot of different things, and Robert kind of felt that he is not he's not accepted. He doesn't fit in. He had kind of poor self-confidence, kind of wanted to be somebody else. So this is where we're picking up that at. I said, wow, it's been a few months since we last talked. At that time, you were getting ready to go to the 8th grade when school started back in September. And now you're a little more than halfway through the year. You've grown, and a lot has changed since the last time we talked. Well, for starters, I see you started smoking cigarettes, and you're so young. You're only 13 years old. Don't you know that smoking isn't good for you? Especially since you have asthma. Plus, smoking is gross. They're nasty and smelly, and they make your clothes and breath stink. They make you smell like an ashtray. What do you call that? Blowing smoke rings. Is that a cool thing? Really? Can't everybody who smokes blow smoke rings? Well, I guess that makes you different from other people. I mean, that makes you able to do something that some of your other friends who smoke can't do. Do you really think that smoking cigarettes makes people think that you're older than you are? So you still want people to see you as someone other than you. Do you feel that you won't be like, that other people won't like you? I don't know why you feel that way, because I think you're a likable young man. Next slide, please. So at that point, I was, and I had written a lot, and was really kind of diving into different events like that, like I just shared. And that the story then ended up becoming not the project. It was the process that I was going through, having a dialogue with my younger self and processing those things That is what caused the transformation in me. At that point, I didn't even realize that I was holding a weight. I didn't realize that there was this weight on me that I eventually that it was lifted and I was liberated from that. Next slide, please. So that experience was very enlightening. I haven't finished it. I'm just actually, I'm probably still in high school, now, and I do want to finish going through my whole life. So the plan is at one point, when I'm done, that my younger Robert and today's Robert connect, and they somehow realize, hey, look here, you were me. But anyway, the thing I want to end with, and that is this: if educators can slow down their response when students are having a traumatic reaction and not focus only on the behaviors, but help the student process their experience or their story through a creative lens, they will help their students become much more than their wildest dreams. Thank you.
Beautiful, beautiful. I am going to take down my screen. Can we just have a moment in chat to reflect, to celebrate, affirm? And I'm going to cue both Amy and Robert and Matt and Cynthia that I'm going to invite you, if you have one sentence that you had wanted to say but forgot to say it, that we're going to go back to just do a round, and then we're going to open it for discussion, and then we'll come back into the main room for break. But I want to take a moment, as folks are writing, that part of what you're hearing through all four of our leadership fellows is the healing power of building a coherent narrative. That one of trauma and grief's greatest skills is to fracture us, is to break us up so that our beginning, middle, end, or our past, present, future feels wobbly and all over the place. And what Matt and Cynthia and Amy did when they interviewed each other and others was externalize fractured internals, right? And Robert then is externalizing previously fractured internals to go from crisis to cohesion. So powerful. Okay, I'm gonna invite, are there last sentences that presenters you're like, I have to say this, otherwise I'm gonna have regret the rest of my life if I don't say this. And then we're gonna open it for either affirmations, questions, or resonances from folks in the room. Burning sentences. Amy Castellanos.
Quick, I think the one thing I can say about this fellowship is that it removed a chokehold that was keeping me from telling a coherent narrative. Like everything was fractured and my throat was closed shut for a lot of it. And this has removed that, what felt like it was a hand over my throat in my professional life.
Yeah, I think not the same words, but exactly, I feel exactly the same. I do feel like a sort of exhale kind of, where I have been holding my breath for such a long time, and what a relief. Thank you. And thank you all for being here.
I think I had the the opposite, and so not the antithesis, but different. Like I think it brought me back to somewhere that I didn't necessarily want to go, but it helped remind me I can't just sever the tie to that. And if I do, it robbed me from understanding the person that was created through that and has been created through that in the past 6 years. So it was painful, but like, and continues to be, but I think also necessary, and I probably wouldn't have done it otherwise. So
Thank you. Thank you, Matt. I'm curious if there are questions or affirmations that folks in the room would like to unmute and offer or put in chat. We have about 5 more minutes. All the other rooms are also going a little bit longer, so we're collectively, it's a shocker, you know. So we're gonna move for about 5 more minutes, and then we'll come back into the main room, and we'll of course go to Pia first. And I want to remind us that we are recording, so anyone who's out loud is consenting to be recorded. Go for it, Pia.
Hey,
Well, I'm retired. I had 38 years in LA Unified. Cynthia, I commend you for balancing baby and this great time in your life. 32 years of service, and I'm now processing the years of service. What has been in my body and my soul and really wearing as a professional. So I just want to give you thanks and gratitude because you're the next generation that are teaching how to process and how to digest this while you're still doing the work. And I think it's going to contribute to your anti-burnout, right? And to your dose of medicine to continue having this humanistic experience, serving others while taking care of yourself. I commend you because I didn't have access to that while I was a professional in the school district. And there's no time to breathe. You're just going to the next and to the next, and that takes a toll. So it's almost like preventive medicine, right? And you're doing it at a cellular level, which is very hard to do. Matt, I get it was probably painful. I heard you. I commend you all, and I learned a lot. So thank you.
Yeah, it's something that we say a lot in the renewal vision, in the SCRR renewal vision, is that it's not actually time that heals all wounds, it's meaning making that does. But time and space do give us permission to reflect in a way that when we're in it, we can't. So one of the folks that Cynthia interviewed, who is a former principal, who I know you know, Pia, now years later can make meaning of what it was like to lead a community in gang and gun-related school violence and death because there's distance from it, that when she was in it, there was no time to reflect because you're handling. So I just want to offer for any of you who are like, I'm 20 years out, or I'm retired, or I'm in a different phase, it's actually the exact moment to engage in this work because there's space now for it. Thank you, Pia. Anyone else wanting to offer a resonance or question for the 4 fabulous fellows?
Hey, Leora, I did want to say one other thing that, you know, and to anybody who is, like you said, anybody who is thinking about it, you know, I think SCRR is a great great program resource to be part of. At first I was very nervous. I didn't think that should be part of this. You know, I was like, you know, hey, maybe my dealing with students is a lot different than everybody else's. And so just like Leora just said, though, this was the thing for me. I needed to be here, and I have learned so much and grown so much through these last 8 months. And I can't say enough about how SCRR has helped me to really heal. I didn't even think I needed healing. So let me just say that it was a wonderful thing. So.
Okay, I'm just leaving time and space for folks to sit with this invitation that these 4 folks are inviting us into to actually leave, throw away, don't even recycle the adage that we all grew up with, that you leave your personal things at the door to be your professional self, because most of us are exactly from the communities that we're serving. And so that's an impossible task, and it invites us to discombobulate and to sever parts of ourselves. And so what these 4 fellows are inviting us to do is to reweave, restitch, right? Formerly segregated parts of our soul and our identity and our spirits back together so we can be a whole person, It's really hard work. Any other resonances, questions, ideas, or thoughts before we move back into the room and transition?
I didn't think I would share, but I guess I will.
Hey, and would you mind sharing like a sentence about who you are before?
Christine Ewing's biggest cheerleader, and former colleague. I'm going to stay off camera. I left suicide postvention and school crisis response a couple years ago because I didn't think I could hack it. And this model is a gift, and hearing about these experiences has been incredibly validating. And I appreciate the language and the framework to make meaning out of it, because I didn't realize how hard it was when I was in it, and told myself a very different story about not being able to hack it. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah. We can do it. I'm going to take hack it out. We can do it. And the doing it is often undoing what we've been told we have to not do. Such beautiful sharing. Thank you. Thank you for making together and being each other's witnesses. We're going to move out of this room back into the main room, and we will have a break, and we'll be starting round 2 in about 5 minutes. So we'll see you back in the main room.